I'm Cameron Temple, I'm Creative Director at Stink Digital. At Stink we've got a large number of people, all creative. We don't necessarily have a creative department per se, but we do have art directors, copywriters, designers. But we don't really work in a segmented way whereby we set a brief to a set number of people and they pass it on to the next. So I'm really trying to shine a light on a little bit how operate as a creative agency without the kind of more traditional values of kind of what a creative team might be.
Thank you, thank you. I'll keep it short. I know I'm last. Some might call it headlining. No, I'm kidding.
Don't get above yourself.
No, it's that introduction I had to step up.
There you go, man. It's all there.
Yeah, I'm good. Which is that? Is that down? Okay. Hi, I'm Cameron. I'm the creative director of Stink Digital. I started at Stink about 5.5 years ago, when it was just, I think, about 10 people in our London office. We're now nearly 100 people in 5 offices, and we've grown from, I guess, what was more traditionally a kind of production company based out of London with our parent company Stink, which is a TV production company. And we've kind of grown into our own sort of digital I don't want to call it an agency because we're not an agency, and our MD will kick the shit out of me afterwards. So we're a company, a creative company, and we're sort of at the intersection of ideas and clients and sort of everything in between. So I've got a show reel, which is brand new, which launched today with our new website. I won't mention that again, I promise, but it did launch today, our new website. And this is our show reel, which will probably do a better, a better job of explaining it than I do. So that's our show reel, which does a great job of showing a cross-section of some of the work that we do. If you want to see it again, it's on our new website. So I'm not going to show you lots of work today. I kind of want to talk to you about how we work rather than what we've done, because the company sort of moved and evolved since I've been there. In fact, every year it's kind of been different. My role's had to change to reflect that. We've started working more with brands, less with agencies, and more for ourselves, doing self-initiated projects as well. So how do you build a creative team to reflect a company that is constantly making and constantly changing? I'll put the remote down. Like this? I would argue not. I don't have a problem with the idea of a creative team being refined down to an art director and a copywriter. But I don't think it really has a place within Stink Digital, because the company's bigger than just art and copy. It's art, copy, and code. And I know this is a slightly antiquated thing now because this was being talked about 3 years ago. It's kind of valid, but it's true. The idea that art, copy, and now development are kind of much more in sync with one another. There's far more disciplines to explore and far more areas that are kind of need to be on the table when you're coming up with an idea. It's not as simple as you sit in a room where the idea is made and then it's given to the developer who makes it, and then the developer puts it online and then everyone sees it. That's just simply not how it works anymore. And I would even argue that art copying code kind of limits that as well. The landscape keeps changing, and it is still changing. There's a new release of Chrome every week. There's VR. There's mobile. There's every single device in the world that can house potential ideas. So what you need is a team that can respond to that and work with those things and constantly build with them. And you need the people who are making these things in the room, coming up with the ideas and being guided by the creatives, not dictated to. So at Stink Digital, I would say a creative team looks a little bit more like this. We have a creative director, but we also have art directors, we also have copywriters, so the kind of more traditional format. But then you also have designers, motion designers, front-end developers, back-end developers, a producer, directors, etc. You have a whole team of people, a whole team of disciplines. And when you bring those people together, that's what makes what I would call our creative team. We don't have a creative department, we have a creative company. Without any of those, I don't think a lot of the work that we do would be possible. Because it's not as simple as an idea, it's an execution and an idea in sync with one another. And I know the ad industry is very big on the whole idea of the idea is king, but the amount of ideas that I've seen don't work because the technology fails it starts to undermine that, I think. So what my job is really about creative direction taking over from creative dictation. Creative dictation is when the idea is cracked in a room with no windows and no walls. No walls, no windows and walls, no doors, a room. And then it's given to a production company or to a developer or to a maker, and they're told to make it. But sometimes that idea isn't makeable, or the idea is too big or blue sky to be made. So therefore, I think creative direction is really where you sit with the people who are making it, and you help them come up with the idea in tandem with the creatives. And I'm not saying creative is a bad word, or creatives aren't a valid role within the idea process, because they come up with amazing ideas, but you put them in a room with a developer who thinks completely differently to them, you're going to come up with completely different ideas. And I've got some examples. I'll show you some of our work and how it's become better than it ever would have been if we didn't have certain people in the room. The key to this, the key to a diverse team and a great creative team comes from one word, which is something that we talk to people that we're interviewing and constantly one another in the company, and that's vocabulary. Different skill sets with one language. I'm not a developer, far from it. I'm not really much of a designer. I studied art and graphic design, but I don't know how to code. But I know how to speak to a coder. I know how to go up to a front-end developer and question him and ask him why he's done something or if he can do something that I want him to do. I know how to go up to a motion designer. I don't use Cinema 4D, but I know how Cinema 4D works. I know what it can do. So I can say, I want to do this. And he's going, oh, it doesn't work like that. And I go, well, how does it work? And he'll go, like this. And I go, oh, well, that's better. Let's try this. And then you have this relationship between everyone in the company, not just this dictation of, I've got the idea, now you go and fucking make it because you're the maker. It doesn't work like that. Sorry, I got a bit angry there. And there's a little bit of beauty in naivety. This is a great quote, Paul Arden, that old golfers don't win, and the reason they don't win is because of experience, and they've got too many things in their head that they know could go wrong that lets them down. So they're cautious, and I think caution is dangerous as well, because it stops you from doing what you don't think can be done. And one of the best ways to attack caution is to just go at it with a healthy dose of naivety. And the amount of times I've tapped on Matteo's desk and asked him how to change or make something move in a way it shouldn't move, he'll explain to me the principles of why it won't move, and then we'll come up with something better than he would have thought of, because he wouldn't have, because he's thinking about the structures of it, better than I would have thought of, because I don't know how it works. So when I explained this concept, this talk, to our tech director, Arpad, who's a bit of a genius, he went, but isn't that just designed by committee? I went, aren't you just going to end up with a load of camels? Very good, Arpad. I'm trying to help you out here. I'm flying the flag for technology. But kind of yes and no. I think yes, when you try to apply this to a team that's not used to it. I think, yeah, you end up with things like this. No, when I think everyone in the room respects one another and has a mutual understanding of what they do, and they have a shared vocabulary for the disciplines that they bring to the table, and you talk about those ideas together and you make them better. So what I've got isn't ideas, but some process that I'll show you. So the best stimulus comes from combining disciplines, combining different disciplines that inspire things that wouldn't otherwise be there. You know, the classical 1 + 2 = 65,000. So here's a demo of, well, not a demo, a breakdown of a project we did called Inside Abbey Road, which wouldn't be the project that it launched as without this very simple bit of technology underneath it. So this is the front end, but then underneath it, not exactly this, but it was powered by this system here. Does anyone know what that is? One person called Scam, who used to be a tech director at Stink Digital. Very well, Scam, it's a point cloud. What is a point cloud? So a point cloud is the 3D data that sits under all of Street View. It essentially gives you the 3D information that allows you to move around Street View seamlessly. Ours is slightly more advanced than Street View, but that's not the point. The point is, we were talking about Inside Abbey Road as almost a linear documentary type experience that guides you around the studio. The moment that Arpad explained that we could do it like this, it transformed it into a virtual world that allowed us to build an entire creative storytelling system around. Because it allowed us to turn that point cloud into a 3D model that we could then transport into WebGL and then dynamically texture with our photos. So our photos went from being static panoramas to a 3D environment. So the potential for then building on that was massive. We could put images in the space, we could have movement in the space, we could transition without cutting. We could build widgets and gadgets, we could build different tours, because essentially all we had was a virtual version of Studio 2, 1 and 3. But the point is, this wouldn't have happened without this. And if that person who knew how to do that wasn't in the room, then the project would have been completely different. So we could have sat creatively coming up with an idea till the cows come home, but it never would have been this if that point hadn't been raised. It also allowed us to then take it in other places that weren't even designed for the original brief. You know, we transported it into bus shelters and allowed people to interact with it on their way to work. We put it into a VR experience. None of these things were designed from the original brief. The original brief was, how do we create a story out of Abbey Road? But because we turned it into a physical environment, it became much, much bigger than the sum of its parts. Here's another project that we did. This is the sort of very early stages of it. So you might have seen some of the Sky Q posters around, all the liquid flying around. We won a pitch to work on that, which was to essentially build the brand site that explained what fluid viewing was. And an idea arose, which was, could we turn the liquid into an interface, into a UI? In theory you could, but how does that work? So I started to speak to Wen, who's our kind of WebGL genius, who then instantly started prototyping. We then brought on Zeitgeist, one of our 3D directors, and started working out how we could animate liquid in a 3D space and let users play with it. How we could physically let them touch it was a big thing coming from the Sky client. They wanted people to get into the liquid and understand it and play with it. But you know, in theory that's great, but how do you come up with an idea that allows people to do that without the people who know how to do it? So we ended up with something that would, you could physically touch and move around, and it responded to everything that you did on the screen completely dynamically. So this is a prototype that we're working on at the moment, which for one of our clients, Strava, which is a way of visualizing data on a map of which, this has been done many, many times, but we're like, well, what if you could transport that to something which was flat, something which was 2D and 3D, and how can you then switch between these things? This isn't even an idea at the moment. I wasn't even involved with this. This was just our front-end guys messing around with some data. But it just goes to show you the concept of a creative team is infinitely broader than just the people who come up with the ideas. It's the people who create. And prototyping is insanely, insanely valuable to everything that we do. But prototypes don't have to be complicated. In fact, sometimes it's better when they're not. This is a prime example of that. This is a looping video, but I'll let you sit with it for a while. So these were our hotshot interns, fresh out of Hyper Island. We had this brainstorm, and we were like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if you could pull people through a film? And we were like, oh yeah, but how would that work? And we had a load of references. And then this guy and Magnus said, oh, I think we've got an idea of how it could work. We had it in our heads, but no one could really put it down on paper. So they went out and they shot this, and they came back, right, we've shot this. We're like, cool. How are we going to fucking show that to? And they're like, oh, no, don't worry, we need to work into it. So then they turned that into this. The sound effect, the comedy sound effect. Oh, okay, that works. So something that was an idea, all of a sudden, from a very scrappy prototype, no code involved, prototypes often associated with code and development. It can be film, it can be pictures, it can be music, it's anything. A prototype is just an articulation of your idea. And I would implore you to make them, because the amount of time that someone comes up with an idea and waits for someone else to tell them that it doesn't work is usually too late and quite expensive, especially if clients are involved. So we could then take this to a director and the client and then turn it into this. I haven't put the whole thing in there, bearing on the light. So this is something that we're working on right now, actually, today. This is a photo I took on my iPhone at the big, James, I have to say iPhone because James said, use a shit picture so people think you took it on your iPhone. I was like, I did take it on my iPhone, it's a good camera. Anyway. So this is something we're doing at the moment. So this isn't even for an interactive project or a website. We've just won a pitch to create an out-of-home campaign for a new tech brand who's never done anything before. Ironically, they don't want to do anything online. They want to do it all in the traditional media. So how do we apply the way that we think as a digital company and as a integrated skill set and use that to turn something as traditional as a vinyl takeover on Bond Street? So what we've done is, I gave this to one of our, this photo that I took on my iPhone. I gave it to one of our 3D artists, who's actually our intern, and I asked him if he could have a stab at building it in Maya. So he did. And then he started saying, well, we could export it as netcode rectangular, and then we could put it in a headset, and we could texture it with our ads, and then give that to the client in a VR headset, so they can know exactly what it looks like. Because all these questions kept coming up, oh, the scale's wrong, or the scale's right, because let's face it, who's ever wrapped Bond Street in a vinyl before? No one's an authority on it. So what we're doing is we're using our in-house skill set. So our creative team now is a motion designer, a designer, and a developer working on a static out-of-home campaign. And I think that's sort of the best articulation of what a creative team is at Stink Digital. It's not a defined role of someone who is naturally creative. It's a body of thinkers who can come together with their different ideas and their different minds and come up with a solution that probably wouldn't have come to light or seen the light of day if these specific people didn't talk to one another. So I'd encourage you to prototype, because trust me, the amount of times we've just run with an idea and then tried to bend it into something because we've sold it to the client and they really, really want it now. Even if it's really cheap and really basic, if it shows you that your idea is fundamentally flawed, don't make it. Because it's going to be really expensive, you're not going to be proud of the work, and you're all going to go home sad. So, shared ownership is a powerful, powerful thing. Because it turns a process like this creative goes to design while these guys are doing something else, goes to UX while these guys are doing something else, goes to build, goes out the door, and no one knows what's happening. Into a process like this, where you've got a team that's firing on all cylinders, the creative, the design, the UX, the builds in sync, because ultimately, everything that all these people are coming up with is going to go live at the same time. So you don't want to step away from that, because then someone else starts changing it and it stops becoming the project it was meant to be, because all these people came up with it at the same point. So, having rambled through all that, these would be the 3 things that I would say are really, really important to any creative team in an agency, in a company, or certainly at somewhere like Stink Digital. Get up and speak to people. Slack, IM, text messaging, if you're over 30. It stops you communicating, and communicating on those channels, I find, is usually a shorthand for just getting stuff out the way. But if you sit next to someone and you ask them questions and you look at them and you touch their screen and put those horrible smudges on it, then you build a relationship and you create the friction that's necessary to come up with an idea that probably wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And get to the bottom of an idea so you don't end up spraying ketchup all over the floor, because we've done that several times. Just prototype, try something out, and that's not a scary thing. Prototypes are a scary word because you think you need a developer for it. You don't. Like, I think Doodle Man proved that to us in spades. You know, you can just make something, and if it's shit, it's shit. But if it's good, then you can make it better. And focus on vocabulary. Talk to people in their language. You don't need to be a developer to speak to a developer. You don't need to know how 3D software works to ask someone to build you something in 3D. These people are out there, they're thirsty for ideas. Work with them and make those ideas better. Any questions? No, that's really it. That's it.